To order the September meeting of the Board of Regents. I've learned from watching Regent Anderson that a heavy hand on the gavel is important and helpful. So you may hear me rapping that more often just to keep up with my colleague from Alexandria. So welcome everybody and good morning again. And we'll begin today's meeting with recognitions and introductions. And I believe, President Kaler, you and I will head over to the podium to do exactly that.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. It's my honor to welcome the three newest Regents professors as approved by the Board of Regents in the June 8, 2018 meeting. Established in 1965 by the Board of Regents to recognize the national and international prominence of faculty members, the Regents Professorship is the highest honor the University of Minnesota bestows on its faculty. It recognizes faculty who have made unique and substantial contributions to the quality of the University of Minnesota through exceptional accomplishments in teaching, research, scholarship, or creative work, and contributions to the public good. Professor Gunda Georg is the head of the Department of Medicinal Chemistry, in the College of Pharmacy. She and her research group have published over 200 scientific articles and are involved in the design, semi-synthesis, total synthesis, and evaluation of biologically active agents. Her therapeutic areas of research include cancer, male and female non-hormonal contraception, and epilepsy. Congratulations and thank you. Guna, will you come up here? Here we go. Congratulations. See how big your head is. Good. Now we'll take some photos over here. Good. Wait for a second, we'll take a group photograph. Next is Professor Mark Jenkins of the Department of Microbiology and Immunology. He's also the director of the Center for Immunology in the medical school. Dr. Jenkins and his colleagues investigate CD4 plus T and B cell activation in vivo by directly tracking antigen-specific cells. And the goal of this research is a basic understanding of lymphocyte activation that can be used to improve vaccines and prevent autoimmunity. Professor Jenkins. Congratulations. And finally, for this year, Professor Erica Lee of the Department of History in the College of Liberal Arts is also the director of the Immigration History Research Center. Dr. Lee's scholarly specialties include migration, race and ethnicity, xenophobia, immigration law and public policy, Asian Americans, and transnational U.S. history. At the Immigration History Research Center, Dr. Lee has helped to pioneer new ways of merging immigration history with the digital humanities. She launched and oversees the National Endowment for the Humanities-funded Immigrant Stories Project, which works with recent immigrants and refugees to collect, preserve, and share their experiences with a new multilingual digital storytelling website and archive. Dr. Lee. Photo. And Provost Hanson, would you join us for the photograph? Stand over here. Is better? Yeah. Our next recognition is for NCAA champions, and I'd first like to invite NCAA champion and U of M Twin Cities student athlete Caitlin Long to join me at the podium. Caitlin won the weight throw at the NCAA Indoor Track and Field Championship in March 2018 in College Station, Texas. In doing so, she became the second national champion in University of Minnesota women's track and field history by recording a winning mark of 23.3 meters on her sixth and final throw. That's a long way. She is from Cottage Grove, Wisconsin, and we love, no, I won't make Wisconsin go. And previously was a two-time NCAA Division II national champion at Winona State before transferring to the University of Minnesota. She is a psychology major in the College of Liberal Arts, and her goal is to train at the Olympic Training Center in California after graduation and continue her education through graduate school in psychology. We hope she comes to the University of Minnesota to do that. Please join me in congratulating Caitlin Long. And now I'd like to invite NCAA champion and U of M Twin Cities alum, Obsa Ali, to join me and Athletic Director Mark Coyle here at the podium. Obsa won the 3,000-meter steeplechase at the 2018 NCAA Division I Outdoor Track and Field Championships in Eugene, Oregon in June of 2018. In doing so, he became the University of Minnesota's men's track and field program's 14th national champion. He is the university's first national champion in the steeplechase, breaking his own school record at 8 minutes and 32.23 seconds. Keep close track. And he broke Don Tim's nearly 47-year school record at the NCAA West Preliminary. Obsa Ali is earning his degree at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities as a double major in human resource management and business marketing and a minor in retail merchandising in the College of Design. And please join me in congratulating him. You'd like to think a lot of it. Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. Mark. Here's Coach.
Yeah, let's get in front of the podium.
Here, now we're just down.
Next are the introductions of two new vice chancellors, one at our Rochester campus and the other at our Crookston campus. So I will invite Chancellor Lori Carroll and Vice Chancellor Ratliff Crane to join me at the podium. Chancellor Carroll and I are thrilled to introduce the new Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs and Innovation at the University of Minnesota Rochester, Dr. Jeffrey Ratliff Crane. Immediately prior to joining UMR, he was an associate dean at Augustana College in Rock Island, Illinois. And we're pleased to share with you that prior to Augustana, he served at the University of Minnesota Morris in various capacities, including as professor of psychology, director of the Academic Center for Enrichment, and an assistant dean. At both Morris and Augustana, he led efforts to integrate students' full academic experiences, including student research, internships, advising, and career pathways. Vice Chancellor Ratliff Crane began his tenure at UMR on August 15, 2018, and his portfolio includes academic leadership for UMR's interdisciplinary academic department, the Center for Learning Innovation, as well as enrollment management, learning analytics, library services, registrar, and One Stop. I don't think there's anything you're not in charge of at Rochester. That's good. Our new Vice Chancellor will play key roles to build and sustain academic partnerships with other University of Minnesota system campuses, as well as graduate and professional schools, Mayo Clinic School of Health and Sciences, and others to meet the workforce and innovation needs of Rochester and Southeast Minnesota. Jeff, would you like to say a few words? Welcome. Right.
No, it's an absolute honor to be once again part of the University of Minnesota, and I'm really happy to be back, but especially in working with the talented faculty and staff at UMR and the research and scholarship they're doing on scholarship of teaching and learning and the application of that work related to the health sciences. So I'm just really happy to be back and part of the university. Thank you.
We're happy to have you. Please let's take a photograph. And now, Vice Chancellor Hoffman, could you join me at the podium? Chancellor Holzclaws had to leave early in order to make it back to Crookston in time for the former Vice Chancellor Barbara Knigh's retirement party. She has a busy day today. Welcome. And I'm delighted to welcome the new Vice Chancellor of the University of Minnesota Crookston, Dr. John Hoffman. And I'm proud to share with you that Vice Chancellor Hoffman is a proud University of Minnesota alumnus, having received his PhD and his MA in Educational Policy and Administration from the university's College of Education and Human Development. He comes to UMC with an extensive background in student affairs and with a strong record of growing program enrollment, increasing persistence rates, and closing achievement gaps. He also has experience as an academic administrator in graduate-level educational leadership programs at the California State University system. Vice Chancellor Hoffman joined UMC on July 30th, and he's already hit the ground running on strategic enrollment management. In addition to that responsibility and student retention, his portfolios include all academic departments, student affairs, enrollment management and student services, and institutional effectiveness. John, welcome. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. President Kaler, members of the board, it is so good to come home to the University of Minnesota system, and especially to the gem of the University of Minnesota Crookston. As you know, it's a very special place. We serve a very high proportion of first-generation college students, low-income students, adult learners, And the impact that we are making on the region, farms, communities, it just means a lot to me in my heart, especially where I came from. We have some work to do. Though we lead the region, we're ahead of the region in terms of the proportion of students of color. We're behind our schools, our high schools, and so we have work to do there. We have to grow our enrollment, and we have to make sure that every student comes to Crookston knowing that they will graduate from Crookston, and I'm committed to doing that. I'm looking forward to working for you, for the faculty, staff, and student affairs educators at Crookston, and mostly for our students. Thank you.
No problem. Show them or nothing.
Just put them on YouTube.
Well, thank you, President Kaler, and several of many members of the board had an opportunity last night to share dinner with some of our Regents professors, and this morning's little ceremony there is meaningful in a lot of ways, but an opportunity to see our outstanding student athletes, our outstanding faculty, and to meet and welcome new leaders on the administrative side of the organization. We're a broad organization with a lot of component parts, and very, very nice to have that opportunity. So we're at the point now to approve minutes. That's an action item, and I'd welcome a motion and a second. And
So moved.
Second. You. Any commentary or editing on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, signify so with the sign of aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good. That brings us to your report, President Kaler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to update the Board of Regents on the work taking place across our university system as we launch into a new academic year. As you know, I'm an engineer, and that means I naturally search for patterns. And there's a prominent pattern that I'd like to share with you today, and that is the University of Minnesota leads. The Chronicle of Higher Education released its 2018-19 Almanac at the end of August, and here's what it said. The University of Minnesota has the 5th highest number of principal investigators for research among public institutions across the United States. We're ranked 5th in the nation for granting research doctorates. That puts us between Berkeley at 4 and Stanford at 6. The Twin Cities campus is ranked 15th for flagship universities with the lowest percentage increases from 2007, the lowest percentage tuition increases from 2007 to 2017. Beating my friends at Madison, I might add. And we're ranked 8th in the nation for colleges that raised the most in private donations for FY 2017, with a remarkable $339,394,147 raised across the university system, and you'll hear some more about that later this morning. And we're also just a fun place to be. Jet Setter magazine, which I'm sure the board subscribes to, ranked Minneapolis the #3 college town in the country, again ahead of Madison, and highlighted the Weisman Art Museum in Dinkytown. The Grand Forks Herald recently ranked Rochester as the top college town in Minnesota. And College Consensus ranked UMD among the 25 best river and lake colleges in the country. Sierra Magazine ranked the University of Minnesota Morris as a top 40 cool schools for 2018. That ranking takes into account sustainability initiatives and efforts to preserve the environment. U.S. News & World Report ranked Crookston second in regional colleges in the Midwest. UMC has been among the best 3 regional schools for 22 years straight. We're Minnesotan, so we indeed are all above average. The University of Minnesota is a top-ranked institution. We lead across Minnesota and beyond in teaching, research, and outreach, and let me give you some more examples. Just this past Saturday, the Star Tribune featured a startup called Inverde. Inverde LLC was launched by Associate Professor of Chemical Engineering Paul Downenhauer and Energy Executive Dave Glebel. Their concept is to turn carbon-based waste products, which include plastic waste and animal waste, into synthetic gas. And their work has the potential to transform waste management across industries from farming to manufacturing. Dr. Downenhauer earned his doctorate at the university and is reported by the Star Tribune, quote, developed and patented Inverde's waste-to-gas process, working through the school's technology transfer office and the U.S. Department of Energy helped fund his research. In Minnesota speak, I'd say that's not bad. His partner in this venture, David Glebel, earned his BA in microbiology at the university before working for Mobil and ExxonMobil. University researchers and scientists developed the first KISS apple, which has an excellent storage life, is licensed through the university's Office of Technology Commercialization, and importantly is delicious. And it was a big hit at the State's Fair. An educational technology startup launched by the University of Minnesota was purchased by Microsoft earlier this summer. Flipgrid, a company based on technology developed by researchers in the Hughes College of Education and Human Development, engages students in classroom topics by using short video responses to give each person an equal voice. According to a recent Flipgrid blog post, as part of Microsoft, the platform will be free for all to use as educators and students. Associate Professor Charlie Miller developed the platform alongside graduate student Brad Hossack to hear a dozen of his students' thoughts on curriculum design. Since then, the platform has spread across the country and the world. Today, it has users in more than 180 countries, not only in classrooms at all levels, from preschools to universities, but in companies and organizations outside of education as well. All of these stories are remarkable, yet also remarkably common. The University of Minnesota fosters exploration, creativity, and excellence in its students and guides its scholars and researchers to develop and patent groundbreaking research with real-world implications. The University of Minnesota also hosts a wide range of leadership programs for students and scholars from around the globe. As an example, I had an opportunity to host 2 remarkable leaders at East Cliff this summer. First, the Mandela Washington Fellows, who are young leaders from sub-Saharan Africa with records of achievement across their communities. We also hosted the Public Policy and International Affairs Fellows, comprised of outstanding undergraduate students from underrepresented and diverse constituencies from around the United States. Both groups undertook in-depth leadership and public policy training at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs this summer. As a university, we have an obligation to provide the best foundation possible for our students and communities to thrive, learn, and lead. And that's one of our mandates as an institution. We do it pretty well, and we strive to do it better. With my transition from the presidency in June of 2019 and the departure of Executive Vice President and Provost Karen Hansen in December of 2018, good leadership is top of mind. Just this week, I asked our university community for nominations for an interim Executive Vice President and Provost with the goal of having that leader named by mid-fall. We are thrilled to officially inaugurate Dr. Laura Carroll as Chancellor of the University of Minnesota Rochester on September 21st, and we all look forward to the Board of Regents' selection of a new university president. In these periods of transition, the work of our students, faculty, and staff continues. We persevere in groundbreaking research, and students grow in knowledge of the world and themselves. The university's mandate to teach, research, and explore, and to connect with our communities has never been more important. And a top priority of mine during this transition is to facilitate a better campus climate, to nurture environments across the university that ensure everyone feels welcome and has a seat at the table with the lens of equality, equity, diversity, and inclusion. There's no magic formula to make this happen, but we're taking a number of steps to bolster support for underrepresented students across our university system. Here are a few. First, we have selected a new Vice President for Equity and Diversity, a role with system-wide responsibility, and we're delighted that Dr. Michael Goh is taking up this challenge. We've committed to phase 3 of the university's Community Outreach, Retention, and Engagement program, known as CORE, to develop pipelines of historically underserved high school students into the University of Minnesota. And innovative work is being done across the university system. UMR has developed centers around campus called Just Ask, which serve underrepresented students by fostering connections and building relationships across campus and with potential employers. Part of ensuring a positive campus climate is also to look to our past. Along with Provost Hanson and FCC Chair Joe Constant, I'm initiating the next phase of our work on building names and institutional history. Building on the exceptional work by members of the Coleman Committee, I will soon charge a task force to recommend actions on the buildings mentioned in the recent A Campus Divided exhibit and the MSA proposal to rename Kauffman Memorial Union. The scope of the charge will go beyond namings towards education and scholarship to address this question. How do we link past practices and action, our university history, with contemporary issues across our campus? Another essential component of campus climate is the prevention and appropriate handling of sexual misconduct across our university, whether perpetrated by faculty, staff, or students. To this end, we're pursuing the following changes to the university's approach to sexual misconduct. First, standardizing the university's administrative policy and procedures related to student conduct code violations. Building on the momentum we achieved last year in mandatory training to prevent, identify, and respond to sexual misconduct at the university. And launching an awareness campaign on the Twin Cities campus. The theme of the campaign is It Ends Here. The student-focused messages center on bystander intervention techniques, pointing people to a website to learn more. The campaign is being shared through posters, digital signs, tip card, and a video produced by the Minnesota Student Association. It's going to be a big year, an active year, and I look forward to discussing my system-wide and other major strategic priorities with you later today. It is indeed a privilege to do this work. I hate to end this way, but on a somber note, we are mourning the tragic death of a University of Minnesota Twin Cities student on Wednesday of this week. Our immediate focus is on supporting his family and friends. But I've also directed the Office of Student Affairs to immediately engage leaders of Greek chapters in the Interfraternity Council, the Panhellenic Council, the National Panhellenic Conference, and the Multicultural Greek Council to help them conduct a thoughtful and exhaustive safety review. I don't yet know the specific circumstances that led to his death, but the St. Paul Police Department is investigating, and we will report on the manner of death when it becomes known. These tragedies are unacceptable, but we can best honor the memory of this student by keeping and taking steps to make our campus safer. With that, Mr. Chair, I conclude my report.
Thank you, President Kaler. Thank you for that thoughtful closing. The hearts of all 12 members of this board go out to that family and their friends as well. I'll use my time in part to deliver the report of the Presidential Performance Review Committee. The committee included Regent Powell, Regent Omari, and myself. We convened our first meeting in May and concluded our work on August 21st during a meeting with President Kaler. Throughout the process, we spent a great deal of time gathering input from our fellow regents, senior leaders, faculty leadership, and external stakeholders. Our report has been distributed to the board and is now being made available to the public. I'd like to highlight a few items from the report. You all have it before you here. First, President Kaler's leadership has been critical in advancing our partnership with Fairview. President Kaler will provide an update on M Health Fairview later in the agenda. Second, philanthropy continues to be a key strength for President Kaler, as evidenced by the success and momentum of the Driven campaign, about which we'll hear later from our co-chairs and our UMF president in a later item on the meeting agenda today. Third, the university has maintained excellence in academics and research while also advancing its land-grant mission through access and inclusion. And finally, and again, these are just highlights, President Kaler has worked to control costs and limit tuition increases for Minnesota students while also reallocating $90 million as part of his Operational Excellence Initiative. Overall, the past year was one of great success for President Kaler and his administration, and we know that going into his 8th year leading the university, he is well positioned to deliver on our 3-part mission. The university is equally well positioned to attract a new president who can continue to accelerate and make the progress that President Kaler has made during his term. The committee also identified priorities for the year ahead, and those include laying the groundwork for a successful transition of presidential leadership, finalizing and implementing a new partnership with Fairview, continuing energy and momentum of the Driven campaign, advancing system-wide strategic priorities, again, about which we will hear later in the meeting, working towards streamlining university operations and continuing to articulate the university's value proposition across this entire state. These priorities align very nicely with the board's priorities for the year ahead too, and will guide our agenda planning and development in the months to come. I'll come back to the priorities during future meetings and highlight how they connect each month with our agenda items, something I hope you've become used to. And because we have a lot to get done today, I'll move on to the next item and conclude my report there. Which brings us to item 6 on our agenda, the quarterly report of grant and contract activity. We will note and receive and file those items in the docket, and that takes us to the consent report. And I would welcome a motion and a second to accept and approve the consent report.
So move.
Discussion on the consent report. Hearing none, Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a new revised copy, I think, in front of us. Have there been any other changes since yesterday? Other than the reprinting of?
The revised copy you have, I think, is Finance and Operations. Do we have any updates on the consent report? I don't believe so, Regent Hsu.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All in favor of approving the consent report? Aye. Opposed? That item is concluded. Should I wrap my gavel, Regent Anderson, or can I just consider?
Gently. Keeps them awake.
Okay. All right. On now to the Fairview M Health agreement update. President Kaler.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. My comments today are extraordinarily brief. As you know, the Board of Regents and Fairview Health Services approved a non-binding letter of intent in June, which allowed the university, UMP, and Fairview to begin negotiations towards a new and stronger partnership. Our teams have worked diligently over the summer to develop a partnership that will improve care delivery and support the medical school and the health sciences. As you know, the current M Health agreement expires on September 30th, and we are ready with our next steps in advance of that date. I can report that the conversations are positive, that we are approaching this work in a new way, and that all involved are ready for a new day. We have provided, under attorney-client privilege, comprehensive updates on where the negotiations are, and so I believe we will be ready to move forward. So I thank you for your support, for making advancement in this area the top priority of this board. As you know, that kind of encouragement and guidance is helpful in making progress. And so with that, I'll conclude my public update on progress.
Very good. Thank you. Questions for President Kaler? He's got other members of the senior leadership team here as well. I know we have identified a date. I don't know that it's been publicly noticed yet, but we will have a special meeting to approve the agreements, the final definitive agreements on this transaction in less than 2 weeks, I believe. So,
It's 2 weeks from the date.
yeah, the date, there it is right there, Friday, September 28th at 10 a.m. So now it has been publicly noticed. There will be official notice going out as well, but that's a monumental and landmark level agreement, and we will certainly bring the board together to in between rather than waiting until our October meeting to make sure we button that up and get it approved. Regent Hsu.
I don't have a question, but I just want to congratulate everybody for getting this done. It's well overdue. We were hoping for it a few years ago, but you know, there's no time like the present to be able to move forward on this, especially in light of the briefing yesterday from Dean Tolar.
Thank you, Regent Hsu. Regent Rocha? I was going to, in my haste to explain the procedural elements of our governance duties, I didn't make the comments that Regent Hsu did. This is, I've been in complex business transactions for 3 decades in my business, and I have never seen a relationship that is as big in scope, as complex, and as comprehensive as it is with Fairview. And I'm again, on behalf of the board, deeply thankful to the Herculean efforts of your senior leadership team, Eric, and a whole lot of other people in this organization to bringing this thing in for a landing. So we look forward to that special meeting and moving forward into a dawn of a new relationship with Fairview. We're very grateful to Fairview as well. I don't know that I see Dr. Hereford or President Hereford here, but we're very, very grateful to James and his leadership team as well. President Kaler?
Thank you, Chair McMillan. This has been, as Regent Hsu delicately pointed out, a long process. It is really incredibly complex, and it has required an alignment of cultures that really reflects a remarkable leadership, both at Fairview, James Hereford, and amongst our team, led by Jacob Tolar, Ryan Burnett, Doug Peterson, and a host of others have worked diligently for a long period of time to bring a truly transformational opportunity to reality, and we will bring it to you in a couple of weeks for what we hope will be your approval.
Very good. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a couple years ago, in being reintroduced to this topic and getting a chance to see the relationship and some of the challenges that we were facing, and the impact that it was having or has continued to have on our academic health center, I was a bit skeptical, as I think you might all recall, about our capacity to get to a point where we have an arrangement that gives us a better opportunity to meet the goals that we have established as an institution. And so I'm very excited to see that. If with the recent bond conversations and so on, I think that you realize that this is very real. The impact of this, I mean, this is not an inconsequential commitment. It's a very, very significant commitment, and I bear optimism, but it's cautious optimism because we have a history, and I appreciate the feedback or the additional input. I know I spoke with Vice Chair Powell about some concerns, and I've received some input on a concern that I had with respect to how we are able to protect the institution, the University of Minnesota, that is, to the extent that we are not able to meet the marks, which again has been an issue in the past, and how we address those things. And I think that we've got a significantly better circumstance. I congratulate our leadership on being able to move into a better phase of this relationship, but not necessarily requiring a commitment that puts a future board in the same situation. We're going to be able to take a good analysis of how things are going over the next several years to determine where things go from there. The one area that I would request clarity, and whether that comes through I would assume that it would come from our general counsel's office. One of the concerns I think that I haven't specifically had addressed is still this question about the university's position. And again, to use the same scenario, when my mother would walk into an M Health facility, she will think she's walking into the University of Minnesota. There's a very good chance she will. And yet it's not. It's not controlled by this board, and constitutionally, this board is charged with being the governing board to controlling the University of Minnesota. And in reading the materials, I fully understand the desire to create this clarity that the M Health Fairview institution is a single delivery system. I've got no problem with that. But I would like to, I'd like to have a better understanding of the implications of our constitutional obligations. And I think that maybe can be obviated by making it clear that in the presentation of information, whether it's to the public or to patients in particular, and it doesn't have to be obnoxious, but just be adequate, to make it clear that this is an affiliation of the University of Minnesota and that it is not the University of Minnesota, to the extent that it's going to have a different leadership enterprise. It's not a gleeful concern that I have, but I think it's an important one for this board to ensure that we know what our position is with respect to that, and to ensure that the public understands that we have the ability to have affiliated agreements, but we want to make sure that they understand that this is the nature of the affiliation, and that this is not the university, because I don't believe we would have the constitutional ability to turn the university over to a different entity. So before we have that meeting, I would really appreciate if we could get some clarity on those very questions. Number one, how it's going to be handled in the presentation to the public, whether it's contractual or signage or otherwise. But secondly, to ensure that we're meeting our fiduciary obligation to serve on this board consistent with the state constitution. Thank you.
I see our general counsel in the audience, and trust he was listening, and that we can provide some added context and added constitutional assessment there. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with that being said, I think this is incredible progress. And if we're able to address that, relatively narrow, but sort of a kind of an unavoidable consideration, I think that we're in a much, much better position, and I appreciate the work that Dr. Tolar and the team have put in, as well with President Kaler in getting us to this point. Thank you.
All right. Very good. Sorry, I'm Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be attending the special board meeting by telephone, so I'm not sure how much bandwidth they'll have to participate. So I would want my comments for the record today, partly. When I joined the board 10 years ago, there was almost no conversation about what we called south of Washington. And we were focusing on north of Washington. There are good reasons for that. There was a real priority, and our predecessors done a wonderful job north of Washington. But with the arrival of President Kaler, very early recognized the need to really sort of look at this. And there are a lot of reasons not to look at this relationship. There's a lot of history. I'm not going to do an archaeological dig on this, but there are a lot of reasons not to go there into this relationship. And we inherited a series of agreements that really forced us to work closely with Fairview. We didn't have control of that relationship. They didn't have. It was a bilateral agreement. I think this is the most consequential vote that I've taken in the 10 years that I've been on this board. At the end of the day, from our standpoint, with all the other benefits that will accrue to our partner, it is about our medical school. So keeping our eye on the ball with the medical school, giving them the resources that they need, helping them be successful. Yesterday we talked about a vision for a clinical research building. We talked about the potential for a hospital. We talked about the need for other improvements to that part of campus. That all takes resources, and this is a way to help provide those. So I am really pleased. Thank you, President Kaler, for taking this on your team. It's been as difficult as we all probably expected it to be. There's other potential outcomes, other opportunities in the medical school. We don't need to go into those, but they create some momentum for us to keep making progress, and your successor this will be work at a priority for the next 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Beeson. Thoughtful and appropriate comments. You bring a lot of perspective to that over the time you've been here. I'm going to ask President Kaler now to take us into our next agenda item, which is system-wide strategic priorities. We have a system-wide strategic plan that's underway, and obviously with a transition in presidential leadership, we're sorting out what about the plan we do, but it makes perfect sense, I think, at this time to visit about what of the plan work that's been done should be prioritized and where do we go next. So President Kaler, please.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. I have a slide deck, but my teaching assistant seems to have not loaded it. There we go. Thank you. So, in close consultation with the Board of Regents, my administration has developed a draft system-wide strategic plan over the 2017-18 academic year. Next slide, please. The draft system-wide strategic plan built on the system-wide strategic framework developed by former Chancellor Lemkuhl and Vice Provost Ropers-Hillman, who engaged in extensive listening and consultation processes across the university. During the last academic year, the board heard from senior leaders on the following elements of the system-wide strategic plan: teaching and learning, research and discovery, outreach and public service, medicine and health, and supporting the mission. As I announced by presidential transition, the board recommended that we move ahead with some key elements of the plan, now reframed as system-wide strategic priorities. And today's discussion centers around these priorities. Before we dive in, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the many faculty, staff, administrators, students, and community members across the university who contributed to this vital work. In particular, I'd like to thank Executive Vice President and Provost Hanson and her team, Vice President for Research Al Levine and his team, Vice President for University Relations Matt Kramer and his team, including outstanding graphic design support from Kathy Rumsa, Dean of the Medical School and Vice President for Academic Health Sciences Jacob Tolar and his team, Senior Vice President Brian Burnett and his group, and our chancellors at Crookston, Duluth, Morris, and Rochester. And so due to the rigor and the seriousness of purpose that these many voices have brought, we have a much better handle on what we can and should achieve together as a university system. While the full system-wide strategic plan is on pause as we transition, we're equipped to move forward with system-wide strategic priorities that have the potential to make a real impact across the University of Minnesota over the 2018-19 year. Next slide, please. First, in teaching and learning, we've developed a work group to pursue opportunities for system-wide enrollment management. Our system chancellors and the executive vice president and provost are deeply engaged in this work. This system-wide strategic priority will entail work on the following objectives: decrease the flow of Minnesota students to four-year competitors both inside and outside the state, recruit applicants to other system campuses when not admitted to their campus of first choice, and develop a system financial aid strategy and improve messaging around net cost, pricing, and the value proposition of the University of Minnesota brand. And to this end, we're developing systems, policies, and procedures to minimize bureaucratic barriers, and they do exist, to cross-system enrollment. Next, in research and discovery, we're focusing on addressing Minnesota's core and emerging research needs. These include growing MnDrive beyond its current priority areas to address important and emerging issues, including aging and opioid addiction. And to support this work, we will engage across disciplines, including the social sciences, arts, and humanities, to enhance current and emerging MnDrive priority outcomes. We are Minnesota's land-grant university, and with that comes an imperative to pursue innovative research to address issues of importance to Minnesotans. Third, in outreach and public service, we are pursuing optimization of marketing and communications across the system. These efforts include designing and creating, delivering and promoting a style guide for all system communications professionals that is attentive to equity and diversity, promoting services that help reduce duplication in units and leverage resources across the system, and pursuing a tool that will enable units to design and deliver targeted communications featuring their specific content as well as system-wide content. Fourth, in medicine and health, we're prioritizing the enhancement of clinical partnerships. That should be no surprise. We're going to create an aligned care delivery system, reimagining our partnership with Fairview, because as it becomes successful, it will provide new opportunities and support for the medical school mission and for an expanded role for all health science professions. exploring options to enhance and optimize pediatric care delivery in the region, and building partnerships statewide to provide exceptional care and expand clinical trial and education training capacities. These partnerships will also support Minnesota workforce and research priorities. And finally, in supporting the mission, our priority is to optimize resource use across the system. This effort will require pursuing opportunities to generate new revenues internally and externally, prioritizing mission support and administrative reallocations, building on the $91 million in administrative savings we've achieved over the past 6 years, and prioritizing service levels and appropriate delivery strategies for facilities, information technology, and human resources. So before I take questions at this point, I'll pivot to my other pressing priorities during my final year as president of the University of Minnesota. And my goal is to capitalize on this transition year. That means do some things that are hard. The first group of priorities for this year is finishing existing initiatives. These should be delivered with a bow around them to my successor so that he or she can hit the ground running. The priorities include completing the major agreement with Fairview Health Services, reorganizing the Academic Health Center, now underway, and charting a way ahead for our facilities and campus community in St. Paul, which we discussed yesterday in the Finance and Operations Committee. The next group of issues centers around the resolution of complex issues. These priorities include reworking policies for namings and potential renamings of university buildings, which I mentioned in my president's report, determining a better way forward for university childcare on the Twin Cities campus. And finally, the third group are our big lifts. And these priorities relate to multi-year, multi-pronged efforts related to institutional culture, including continuing to combat sexual misconduct on campus, deepening our efforts on equity, inclusion, and diversity as led by Vice President Go, and in addition, centralizing some operations where appropriate and making strategic land use decisions. So in closing, I want to extend my gratitude for the phenomenal work undertaken across the university to develop the system-wide strategic plan and its resulting set of priorities I've laid out for you today. Our strategic planning process has made it abundantly clear that we truly are stronger together. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll welcome comments or questions.
Thank you, President Kaler, and I'm going to turn first to our Vice Chair, who has, with Regent Rocha, been integrally involved from a Regent standpoint, working with your team, and Regent Powell.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. And so really just in way of comment for fellow board members, you asked Regent Rocha and I think about a year ago to be your delegates, if you will, to the system-wide strategic planning process. We've done that. I'm sure Regent Rocha will want to comment as well over the last year. Those have been very productive conversations and very rewarding. Nevertheless, I think we all concluded that the broader system-wide strategic plan is best left to the President's successor. But having said that, there's clearly been very good work done across a variety of areas and domains in the strategic area, and the President summarized those, and we, Regent Rocha and I, discussed those initiatives with he and members of his team, Chief of Staff Stedman and Deputy Chief of Staff Hayes. And you heard about those, enrollment management, where we clearly have very good opportunities in front of us right now. MinDrive, which has been a winning program for us. The communication strategies that we saw. Academic medicine, where we're, as soon as we get this agreement, we're going to have to pivot quickly to a series of strategic discussions, and I think starting that dialogue now makes a lot of sense. And then you heard about optimization of resources. So I really just wanted to report to the board that we had very good conversations over the course of the year. We think it makes very good sense to continue to pursue and develop the areas that President Kaler outlined, and there's, I think there's a lot of a good opportunity here.
Thank you, Regent Powell. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couldn't have said it better. I appreciate where President Kaler and his team have gotten us at this point. I think that, I know I've tried to, at least at some point in time over this process, talk to each of you and try to get input as to whether there's something of that you'd like to inject at that point, and when that has happened, we've had that conversation. And while I recognize what President Kaler was saying as far as the presentation of a plan comprehensively is on pause, the process of preparing for that transition to President Kaler's successor does not, I think we will continue to be doing that, gathering the information necessary, and certainly these priorities, which I think reflect a kind of an advanced stage of that process in these priority areas, will be a good template for the remaining areas that we're going to be bringing up to speed and then putting together in a comprehensive way. So I also thank the administration for the work that they've put forward on this. I think we're in a good place right now, and in a very appropriate place considering the posture of our leadership in President Kaler's final year here. So thank you.
Thank you, Regent Rocha. I'm not seeing any other board members interested in input, comment, question. There we go. Okay, now I see two. Regional Mari first.
Thanks for choosing the better looking of the two.
That's due largely to the beard, right?
Of course,
yeah, okay.
Absolutely. I'd agree that this is a great way to move into a new generation with a new leader coming in, and so I'm excited for that. I think, I'm appreciative that you're taking this year full throttle, Mr. President, and going into some areas that look like they'll be challenging, and you'll clearly be busy. I'm a bit disappointed by the naming committee decision, going from committee to committee. I was hoping that you would have made a bold statement and stance on this topic by now, and we've talked about that. So I look forward to seeing where this goes, and I'm also glad that it'll be a decision that comes before June 30th. So I'll be watching and looking forward to how those deliberations continue. Thank you.
President Kaler.
Thank you, Chair McMillan and Regent Omari, and I appreciate your focus on the naming issue. Please understand, I am trying to find a space and a way for the community, largely the larger community, to carefully consider and weigh in on what is really an important. As far as I know, we've never renamed a building in 162 years of history. So I am being cautious. You certainly are fair to observe that may be slow, but we will get there.
Thank you. Regent Anderson.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. I'm gonna focus on, well, first I'll focus on Regent Omari here. Nothing new to me, Regent Omari. When you're small and skinny and you're a mortuary science major at the university, you don't get a lot of people looking for you. So,
but you got the one. That's all that matters.
That's right. But anyway, I want to focus on the slide on teaching and learning, and it just hit me yesterday. We had a discussion in finance and operations. I think a lot of it pertained with CFANS, our food, agriculture, natural science, and it was possibly in the discussion. I know it was in the discussion on the future of the St. Paul campus and remodeling and doing things over there. From where I come from, on the western area of Minnesota, you guys have heard this before, the decreased flow of Minnesota students to four-year competitors. We want to decrease that, and especially in the ag community, we have South Dakota State and North Dakota State. And it's not necessarily that they're looking to go to those schools because of their ag program, but there's also a cultural issue that the kids that graduate from Alexandria High School, a lot of them are not ready, at least in their opinion or their parents' opinion, to come to the urban campus of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And I also talk about it in the world is fast changing to K to 14, where we have so many kids go to the PSEO route and stuff to save money. We need to be more diligent in how we recruit those best and brightest to the University of Minnesota. Because again, where I come from, if we don't have the best and brightest coming down here learning, we have a hard time getting those kids back to the rural areas to set up the businesses to make the economic development flow. So I think we just really have to be diligent. I've talked about this before, the Vet Fast program at Crookston, where we've been able to get large animal vets by letting them go to Crookston first for undergraduate, reach a certain proficiency level, and be automatically admitted to the University of Minnesota Vet School if they reach that level. I think programs like that we can create a pathway, or especially Minnesota Morris, Minnesota Crookston, Minnesota Duluth, for our kids, and Rochester, which is all health science, but for our children to students, have that pathway, know they can go to an outside system campus, but get admission for graduate programs or professional programs into the Twin Cities. I think it's something we really need to work on. So that's all I have to say, and I don't necessarily need a comment. I just like to comment on how important it is to us out in outstate Minnesota.
Thank you, Regent Anderson. I've got Regent Hsu, Mason, Lucas, and Simonson. We'll go in that order. Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. President, for bringing this to us. I do think this is the right approach to pursue these system-wide strategic priorities for the next year. And I'm looking for the new president to bring us a 2030 plan, take us out 10 years at some point early in his or her tenure. But I want to comment on a few things. First one is the teaching and learning first bullet that Regent Anderson had brought up. We know that students want to come here. We just have, because of our 28 ACT average, the requirement that we maintain that. I think we're losing a lot of students that would bring that average down a little bit. And we're doing ourselves a disservice, because not only is that revenue today for the next several years as those students attend here, but if we lose them now, we lose them potentially forever. They may come and do graduate work here, but we're going to lose the philanthropy that comes from those students and their families for generations if we don't do a better job of retaining them. And that's why I have to beat the drum on test optional for a few seconds here. Because test optional will actually raise our ACT scores. And test optional doesn't mean no one's going to submit a score. It's just that if you are on the lower end of the range, you may choose not to submit a score, but you would then rely on us to look at the secondary factors of our admission process and possibly admit you. So I think we need to look closer at that at some point, hopefully this year, but if not, soon. And then on the priorities, I was also disappointed in the naming memo. That committee has been running for quite some time. I did go and look at the exhibit on the university history. It was a lot of that stuff in there is appalling. And I had asked that each of you, if you couldn't get there, receive copies of each board or poster. And I think everybody got a copy of that. But I think if you read carefully through that, you will see that there are a lot of things that you might be uncomfortable with. Now, I'm not going to take a position on whether or not we rename something, but I think we need to get closer to that sooner rather than later, because this is just going to drag on forever if we just pass it from committee to committee and then start new committees. Also on the strategic long-term vision, I'm not sure if it's called the same thing in this presentation, but the one that we discussed yesterday, I do believe that in order to make progress on that, we have to obviously define what the inputs to that process are in terms of the academic direction going forward and the capacity of the schools. As we talked about yesterday, CHD is, I believe, undersized, significantly undersized in terms of the number of students that they're serving. And then lastly, on the future of the child care plan for the Twin Cities campus, I understand that the CDC is going to be displaced by the new child care, I'm not sure what it's called, the Institute for Child Development maybe. But I think that the initial closing date was set to be 2019, and I'm wondering if the facility, if that means the facility is going to be empty until we start construction, hopefully if we receive the funding, and who knows when that's going to be, but I'm wondering what the story is there and what the direction is to provide more child care benefits for our faculty and staff. We often talk about needing to compensate them better, but I think this is part of the compensation is to be able to provide quality child care on campus or near campus. And this is what the TDC had been doing for 20-some years. And I'm looking forward to seeing the results of that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to, I thought President Kaler's response to Regent Omari on the historical namings concern he raised and that you've now raised again was very appropriate. I agree with all of it. And what I want to add to that is I'm in my last year as chair of this organization as well, and it is an equally high priority for me to bring it in for a landing. And I think President Kaler's thoughtful and albeit slow, but thoughtful is the primary word there, and considerate and inclusive approach on this is key. And what I'm saying is I want you all to know it's an equally high priority for me that we resolve this. So I don't think it's a kick the can. In fact, I'm quite confident in my conversations with President Kaler that's not at all what this is. It's making sure we handle a complex and difficult topic well. So I'm going to turn to Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make a couple of comments on the historical namings process since that's been raised. I do think I think we have to be extraordinarily careful around this, and I think we need to focus on guiding principles, and we need to agree on those. We need to internalize those, and I think as Regent Shoes, in your own words, that you're not ready to make decisions about buildings. I'm certainly not ready to make decisions right now. I need more time. I did go over to the exhibit last winter. It was powerful. I think everybody should go online and really look at this. This is important, but I'd rather give it the time that it needs to make sure that before we start talking about names and buildings, that we're really agreeing on those criteria and principles. And we do that, then I think we'll be able to come to some decisions with the administration. The second comment is I want to go to the strategic enrollment strategy. I had made the comment when we talked about the enrollment strategy earlier, and this last academic year. I don't think it's contemplated in this. Maybe it is, but I made the point then that I would like to see a bolder sort of a more differentiated approach to tuition as it relates to our Western Minnesota campuses, and particularly looking at Crookston, looking at some more modeling about dropping tuition. I would rather have the Twin Cities pay more, which is obviously much more elastic, but modeling around what that total net tuition income could be if we were able to increase enrollment by certain numbers, looking at some extent at Morris too, in terms of how we compete very specifically across the borders with North Dakota and South Dakota, and how they present their tuition. And they present it more as a flat sort of cost. This is what everybody gets. We have this gross versus net. I wish we could segregate those out and really focus on those couple schools as a pilot program. And I don't know whether there's a willingness to do that, but I would like to see that as we go into this for the President's last year.
Thank you, Regent Beeson. Regent Lucas.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. Watching this system-wide strategic plan come together has been really a great exercise. I think it's a great piece of work. I think we all feel really good about it. I just like to urge us to figure out how to make, other than the people in this room who feel like we did a great job, get others to realize what a great piece of work this is in particular. And I know it's hard, but if we could get the legislature to really understand what we're trying to do and to buy into what it takes to make this happen. So I know that's tough, but I think it's worth the effort. So.
Thank you. And I'm going to go to Regent Simonson to wrap us up on this topic.
Thank you, Chair McMillan, and thank you, President Kaler. I do support your focus and priorities here. I appreciate them very much. The one question I have, do we have measurables? For example, we're going to talk about decreasing the flow to other states, recruit other system campuses, and do we have numerical goals for that? Where are we today? Where do we want to be tomorrow? Can we look at it?
Chair McMillan and Regent Simonson, we certainly have the data. We're aware of what the flows are. We've not set a numerical goal for that. It's a little bit hard to do, and while goals are important and you need to measure things to move them, creating what would in some sense be an artificial mark doesn't feel like the right thing to do at this stage of time. As we get more sophisticated and knowledgeable about what it works more effectively in terms of better outreach to high schools, as we begin to talk about the price point, particularly at Morris and Crookston, we might get smarter and be able to be more quantitative, but right now we're not.
All right. Thank you, President Kaler, and thanks to the leadership team across this organization that's in the audience and not in the audience for bringing us to where we are on the strategic priorities and planning process. So next on our agenda, and I see our UMF leader and our Driven campaign co-leaders coming to the table. So as they approach, a couple of prefatory remarks from me. It was exactly a year ago, I don't know to the date, but it was this meeting in September of 2017 on a bright and sunny day with a whole lot of band members, a whole lot of Spirit Squad members, a whole lot of the university community, and this board stood out on the plaza outside and had a wonderful launch to the Driven campaign, and so it's appropriate and wonderful to have our team here today to report on how we're doing. And before we do that, I was going to save these remarks until afterward, but all three of the people sitting before us today give their heart and soul to this organization. Kathy, of course, is our leader of the organization, but the two people sitting next to her make a time and resource commitment that is quite stunning. And Regent Powell and I have had a couple of opportunities to sit down and visit with John and Nancy, and on one of those occasions, the demands that they meet to engage our donor community, to lead and to do so exceptionally well was unbelievably evident. And we tend to think we're busy in leadership roles here, and a couple times I've been around you two trying to put your calendars together along with ongoing work responsibilities. I was awed. So John and Nancy, welcome. Kathy Schmidlkoffer, our UMF president, welcome. Please give us a sense of where we stand and how optimistic you are and what comes next.
Well, thank you, Chair McMillan. Good morning, Regents. On behalf of the University of Minnesota Foundation, I appreciate this time to highlight once again the amazing impact of philanthropy and private support to the University of Minnesota. As you know now, I am joined this morning by the incredible co-chairs of our Driven campaign, John and Nancy Lindahl. They represent the 300 volunteer leaders across the university. We are three of the many voices of Driven at the heart of our report today. And I, too, would like to start out this report by remembering back to last year, this meeting. When we ended this report, we walked outside on Gateway Plaza and announced the launch of the $4 billion Driven fundraising campaign. It was the first time we launched a university-wide campaign in 18 years.
And Regent McMillan, you took the words right out of my mouth. The sun was shining. The drum major, pictured here, led the marching band and the Spirit Squad, and an enthusiastic crowd cheered us on. Even the leaves were decked out in maroon and gold. Throughout this past year, we've watched that wave of excitement build as we've shared our Driven message with many different audiences. Let's watch some highlights. of what we've all accomplished.
It's been a wonderful journey so far. It's going to be even better going forward.
We invite you to join us.
It's really your passion that makes a lot of our work possible.
We are celebrating a launch of a campaign that will transform this university, dreaming the University of Minnesota campaign.
Well, what a fantastic look back at some of the highlights this past year. As this video shows, the work of fundraising and private support for the university is a team sport. The University of Minnesota Foundation is a nonprofit organization governed by a 44-member board of trustees, with 1/4 of those board members appointed by the Board of Regents. 3 regents and the president also serves as trustees, so thank you, Regent Beeson, Regent Cohen, Regent Lucas, and President Kaler for your valued service and engagement. A focus on the future is ingrained in the Foundation's vision, and as you just saw, we are privileged to work with donors from Duluth to Dallas and Bloomington to Beijing. We also collaborate across the university system, representing our students and faculty in Crookston, Duluth, Morris, Rochester, and the Twin Cities. The university's Driven campaign began with President Kaler's arrival in 2011 and spans 10 years. University-wide campaigns like ours include a leadership phase of planning to engage leaders and volunteers and secure early major gifts before launching to the public. We cross campus and academic boundaries to unite our faculty partners and leaders in establishing our campaign priorities and our compelling case for support. Every one of the university's 30 college campuses and units are part of the Driven campaign. And together we are making great strides. Higher education campaigns are about building private investments in the university. That means industry campaign counting includes not only philanthropic gifts, but also the private grants brought in through the research powerhouse of our faculty. This chart shows philanthropic gifts raised in maroon and those private grants in gold. And as you see here, in fiscal 2018, we reached a new high for private support and investment in the university. Not only did we set a new record of $476 million this past year, the last 4 years have been our best in history. Driven top $2.9 billion at the close of fiscal 2018, and that's 73% of our goal already raised, with only 70% of our time elapsed. And I'm proud to tell you that the momentum continues. 2 months into year 8, our campaign total now stands at more than $3 billion, over 75% towards our campaign goal. And I think we would all agree that is a milestone we're celebrating.
Nancy and I could not be more proud to be among the nearly 210,000 donors to Driven through the end of fiscal 18. And nearly half, and I just find this to be amazing, are new donors to the University of Minnesota. That's a healthy sign for the future. 9 different donors have made gifts of $25 million or more to this campaign, an incredible vote of confidence in Minnesota's flagship institution. And there have been 2 other very important voices in this campaign, President Kaler and Mrs. Kaler, and our hats go off to them.
I get the best part. President Kaler's vision and belief in philanthropy have been a driving force for launching an ambitious university-wide campaign. John and I can't recall a leader on this campus, and believe me, I have known 7 presidents, who has been more deeply committed to the importance and growth of philanthropy. He has dedicated so much time and energy to meeting with donors, prospects, alumni, and friends across the world. And Karen Kaler has marched step in step with him. They are a large part of the reason that John and I were eager to sign up as campaign co-chairs. Their deep understanding of the importance of building relationships and sharing the university's accomplishments has been key to our success and provides us with an aspirational example for the university's future leadership. The Kalers have played a big role in helping to secure campaign gifts from important partners like Land O'Lakes, 3M, Minnesota Masonic Charities, the David and Janie Larson Family and Foundation, the Benston Foundation, and other individuals like us. As we celebrate President Kaler's accomplishments during his final year as president, one is certainly the Driven campaign and the tremendous growth in private support.
Here are some examples of the impact of our campaign through the end of fiscal 2018. Funds have begun to flow to students as scholarships, fellowships, and support for real-world experiences, study, and abroad. Already, as you've seen earlier, donors have established 883 new undergraduate scholarship funds and 464 new graduate and professional scholarships and fellowships that will benefit thousands of students across our campus. Gifts and private grants are also helping to attract and retain top faculty and researchers. Already, 46 new professorships and endowed faculty chairs have been created. The campaign is supporting critical research statewide in areas ranging from robotics to autism and child development to life-saving medical breakthroughs. The wider community is also feeling Driven's impact through gifts and support, such as the Athletes Village, the new Bell Museum, the Bee Lab, the new Clinics and Surgery Center, and many, many more. Here are some less visible work that Driven has made possible just the past year. Enhanced research and scholarship opportunities for Native American students. a restored historic pipe organ at Northrop, expanded STEM programs for K through 12 students to support our state's future workforce, more global learning opportunities for business students, and a new Wiseman Curator position to foster partnerships through artists and experts from other disciplines.
Our campaign priorities focus on these key areas where the university is making a difference and where Driven can have the greatest impact. We'd like to highlight each of these 5 priorities with a story of how the campaign is already changing lives. Nathan Landwehr used his academic know-how to tackle problems on the job. Nathan made the most of his internships through the University of Minnesota Technical Assistant Program, or MINTAP, which is supported by corporate donations and private gifts. Every summer, it sends talented juniors and seniors to intern with local businesses, helping them reduce energy consumption and use resources more efficiently. Corporate participants over the past 5 years have included 3M, Park Nicollet, Land O'Lakes, IBM, and Excel Energy, along with many smaller and medium-sized organizations as well. His first summer, Nathan worked for the Southwest Regional Solid Waste Commission, where he helped 9 small businesses save money and protect landfills. The next year, he helped Woodbury residents optimize their sprinkler systems through the Smart Irrigation Controller. His work now saves the city 3 million gallons of water each year. All told, MINTAP interns have helped organizations save over $10 million. It's a win-win as companies benefit from new ideas and technologies, and our students gain valuable hands-on experience. Philanthropy is also helping students and faculty statewide to expand the U's impact on agriculture and sustainability. As a biology major on our Morris campus, Savannah Christensen discovered a passion for research and improving the health of the dairy herd at the West Central Research and Outreach Center. She taught calves to use an automated feeding system and helped with dairy research through the Bridgeford Summer Scholars Program, driving her interest in becoming a large animal vet. As a child, Desiree Santillanes saw her family home destroyed by wildfire, but a course in forestry on the Crookston campus helped her overcome her fear of fire. She took part in a prescribed burn with her class and later spent time with a U.S. Forest Service fire crew. She credits UMC's applied education and her scholarships with helping her conquer her fear and pursue her dream of becoming a game warden.
I think we were all astounded to hear that a team of 44 medical professionals from the U had successfully separated a pair of conjoined twins born with their hearts entwined. But that surgery was just one leg on the road to recovery for Paisley and Paislin. Expert teams at the U cared for their mom during her high-risk pregnancy, met across campus over many weeks to plan the complex separation and continued to take care for the growing girls who are now a healthy 17 months old. Philanthropy has helped them every inch of the way. Gifts from many donors support our research care and top medical experts at the Masonic Children's Hospital, where the twins have spent much of their lives. What a nice place to be. Private support also drives technology and engineering at the U's Earl E. Bakken Medical Devices Center, which developed 3D modeling and virtual imaging, critical to the surgery's success. Knowledge gained by their extensive team throughout the twins' treatment will help save even more lives in years to come. And as for the girls, their mom says she can tell they just love being home together. As you've seen today, students remain at the heart of our campaign. At age 11, Charles McGregor knew he wanted to develop computer games. When he heard about an 8-year-old who launched her own business, he asked his dad if he would teach him how to code. That was only the start of the journey. When it came to his education, Charles chose UMD, where he could expand his knowledge through art and music classes that weren't taught at technical schools. He received multiple scholarships and helped design inclusive games that avoid violence and incorporate characters with disabilities and diverse backgrounds. Well before graduation, he became a successful entrepreneur, founding his own development studio where his games have already won awards. Lest you think it's all fun and games, Charles also collaborated with UMD professors of French and German on an app that makes language pronunciation and verb conjugation an interactive experience. Just one more example of the wide range of student experiences our campaign supports. Speaking of invaluable experience, our last story starts with a fellow student I met as a sophomore on this campus. Can't do this one. Bill Walter recruited me as a freshman camp counselor, my very first volunteer role at the U. With the help of scholarships, Bill earned his BS and MBA at our university. He went on to found Heartland Realty Investors and now serves on the Carlson School's campaign committee. A few years ago, Bill and his great friend Bill Van Dyke set a goal of raising $10 million for a new Veterans Fellowship at the Carlson School. As he put it, the Carlson School MBA program gave us the skills to make the transition from battlefield to business. In his case, it was Vietnam, and we want to give that same opportunity to other returning veterans. They surpassed their original fundraising goal through their own generosity and added gifts from alumni, friends, and corporations. Their fellowship has now helped more than 80 military veteran students pursue their MBAs, including the two pictured here. Katie and Colin Robertson spent 10 years in the U.S. Army in Iraq and Afghanistan, earning 2 Bronze Stars apiece for their distinguished service. Now they have 3 young children and were able to complete their MBAs this past spring, thanks to their Veterans Fellowships.
We are always inspired by the amazing impact of so many people's generosity and proud to help donors connect their passion with possibility here at the university. And we're grateful for the chance to share a few stories of the many lives they touch. The voices of Driven range from our donors themselves to students like Katie and Colin, faculty and staff, patients, and members of this great wider community. I'd also like to thank President Kaler and his wife Karen for their dedication to telling the university story these past 7 years. They have dedicated many hours and traveled many miles to meet with university donors and friends across the state and around the globe. Their engagement has been invaluable and key to our success in increasing the impact of private support university-wide. As we end our report, I'd also like to acknowledge the value of your partnership as Regents. On behalf of the Foundation and the entire university development community, thank you. Thank you all for your tremendous engagement with and service to this great institution. We look forward to continuing this driven journey with you because we know what happens in Minnesota matters to the world. Thank you.
Well, you heard my expression of gratitude and gratefulness for the work and the successes that comes from hard work. I'd now like to invite the board to ask questions and make comments, and we'll start with Regent Cohen.
Thanks, Chair McMillan. And I don't really have a question, I just have a comment, which is because I'm lucky enough to be on the foundation and to have attended many of the foundation meetings and so on, I just want to say thank you so much to Kathy and to John and Nancy for the work they do and how it is spread down among the various units and the team spirit that you have built within the organization, and clearly it's made a huge difference. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd certainly echo Regent Cohen's comments and the chairs, and extend a thank you to the Lindahls and to our staff. I don't think anybody understands the amount of time that fundraising takes. There's planning, there's thinking, there's meeting, there's organizing, there's the travel. We know what travel means, but these are long trips to the coast or around the world. And they're not social trips. They are trips that have multiple calls and specific goals in mind, and there's follow-up. And that takes a lot of the staff's time, but for the Lindahls and others, it's just such a commitment of time. One of the things that's, whatever the motives are or the priorities are of the donors, there's one thing in common. They want excellence. So this is a timely conversation when we talk about a strategic plan about staying focused on excellence, whether they want diversity or whether they want access or whether they want whatever their goals are. That's successful people have achieved excellence. They have created wealth because of their own commitment to self-improvement, and they have a lot of choices to where they can send their money, but they will not give it anywhere unless it's excellent, unless we force people to self-improve and to progress. So I hope as we look into the strategic plan that we not retreat from the commitment to focus, as Ken Keller, I think, began that conversation, and it's been followed through the last 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Beeson. I certainly concur with those remarks, and turn to Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Regent McMillan, and thank you, Kathy, John, and Nancy, for your efforts. As you made your presentation, it kept echoing in my mind, what would we do without you? The three of you, as well as all of our donors across the wide spectrum of Minnesota, the United States, and the world. So what would we do without you? We'd be in a different place, and the place would not be as healthy as it is today going forward. So on behalf of my colleagues and myself and the state of Minnesota, we certainly deeply, deeply appreciate all you have done and continue to do. When I look at organizations, whether they be whatever, business, colleges, universities, churches, whatever, I always think about the people, what I call, who are the angels watching over. Now that sounds perhaps a little bit religious on this Friday, but every organization needs angels to keep the matters intact. And so I would, in a most humble way, consider the three of you and all those who are on the foundation board and the contributors to be angels of this university who are keeping watch. And as Regent Frobenius, when he left this board, who was a loyal member, a thoughtful member, I still remember his words. To us regents who are still here, and it's true to you who are working on the foundation, you only have one thing to do, and that is leave this a better place than when you came. And you certainly, the three of you, as well as others, have done that. And so we thank you, we thank you, we thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Johnson. Regent Omari.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. I was struck by the 209,563 donors. And when I look at that, I think about all the folks who are not here and the staff who have been cultivating donors for so many years, who we have the opportunity frequently to interact with in small bits. But I'd be remiss if I didn't point those folks out, in addition to the 95,028 new donors. And on to the folks who are in the room today. I would certainly agree with the sentiment of how much time y'all put into something like this. And somehow I was able to have some good conversation with John and twist his arm a little bit, and he even agreed to serve on the Presidential Search Advisory Committee. And in that is when I actually learned a little bit into what Regent Beeson was talking about as far as the schedule goes. Because he said, well, that day's bad, and that day's bad, and that day's bad, and that day's bad. And I said, John, what are you doing? And he said, I got to raise money. And so much appreciation to the both of you. And as I was on the Presidential Performance Review Committee, single-handedly, every person that I talked to talked about President Kaler's ability to raise money. And beyond that, we recognize the First Lady of the institution, Karen Kaler, who is not walking behind the President, but walking next to him. So hats off to her, and of course to our CEO for all that you do in this realm as well, and for keeping us updated and in the loop along the way. We appreciate it. Thanks.
Very nice and very appropriate, Regional Mari. Regent Lucas.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. It's hard to say anything more about these three people and about this campaign and about President Kaler and what he's done. It's awesome. But I want to build on what Regent Beeson said about excellence. We need to help chart that path to excellence, because that's what inspires people to give. And sometimes it takes courage. It always takes vision. But we can't let you guys down. We've got to have the vision and the courage to push forward. So thank you and good luck to all of us.
Regent Anderson.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. I wasn't going to say anything, but and you know what's coming. But you know, every year I watch these presentations, and I just get absolutely choked up. The reason I ran for the Board of Regents was I think this university has the capabilities to make a difference in the lives of everyday Minnesotans. And I watched the deal. I saw the two conjoined twins there. I know the marriage between technology and medicine, where 3D printers allow the doctors to practice that. And, you know, I go back to the 1950s, although I wasn't here at that time. The University of Minnesota is really where the marriage between technology and medical knowledge with the pacemaker and Earl Bakken and Walt Lillehei started. And so we have a great history of doing that. And I look at those conjoined twins, and I think, you know, it's 55 years ago this October that I was a child at the University of Minnesota Hospital. Where only because I was born in the shadow of the university that I was able to have my surgery by Dr. Lillehei and be here today. So I'm staying for the football game tomorrow. I have time this afternoon. Usually what I do is one day a year or so I walk over to the old Variety Club Heart Hospital, and I walk through there and I see the hallways, and I recognize places I was and where my mother and I were for that whole time. And we couldn't do it without this philanthropy. So I apologize for taking up this time, but President Kaler, thanks for all you've done building philanthropy. The Lindahls, Kathy, thanks for what you guys do, because I do know that you're changing the lives of everyday Minnesotans, because I was one of them. So thank you.
Thank you, Regent Anderson. Your apology is not accepted. So, Regent, let's see, we've got 3 regents left. So I've got Regent Powell, Rocha, and then Shu in that order, and then we need to wrap it up and move forward. So, Regent Powell.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. I'll be brief. I just want to thank all of you for lifting us up as you have, and I really can't be more eloquent than all the voices that have come before me, but we are so grateful for your dedication. And the money and the numbers, and it's all spectacular, but I think what has the most meaning, just to echo Regent Anderson, is the stories that you told and which you told, Nancy, which is so powerful and which really bring it all home to all of us, and which show that it's about serving the people of Minnesota and how we do that. I do actually have a little question, and that is, as we approach the 3/4 mark, I mean, I'm assuming that you pivot in certain ways as you go through these campaigns to different phases, and maybe a few brief comments on some of the kind of initiatives going forward.
Thank you, Regent Powell, Chair McMillan. I think it's a great time to reflect on the next 3 years of the campaign as we bring home it. And so as we look through these next 3 years, a couple key things. One is on the top of all of your mind, is also on the top of our mind, and we're in really great planning and intense planning to make sure that we handle the presidential transition in a way that we can continue the momentum of the campaign. So that would be number one priority over the next 3 years. Two other key things, though. One thing is, again, a continued shout out to John and Nancy and their leadership for the 300 volunteers that we have across the university-wide system. As you can imagine, that's a huge, important asset for us. It's an asset we want to continue on past the campaign. So this year we're going to focus on a volunteer summit, bring everybody together, do a little bit of training, but a little bit inspiring, and thank you for the work that they're doing. And then last but not least, we are excited this fall, again, across the university system to kick off what we think is the faculty and staff campaign. We have a proud number that our university employees are already number one in terms of percentage of giving among our peers, but that means we still have room to go, both in terms of participation and goal. And I think having that spirit come into the employee base is also a really great avenue for us in the campaign.
If I could just add a quick comment. The pipeline is very healthy, and the relationship building and the long-term relationship building will produce many large gifts, and they're ahead of us. We're very, very aware of who they are. It's strategic, but it is about these wonderful relationships. We're on the mark.
You know, and the campaign continues to really take place over 30 very discrete kind of units within the university itself, which makes it unique. And some of them are just kicking off their campaign.
Morris, next Friday, if you want to join us.
In Rochester.
It's not too long a trip.
Regent Powell, thanks for that question, and thanks to all of you for those reassuring responses about pipeline and priorities. So thank you. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In my hometown of Owatonna, there was a person who served on the board named Daniel Gainey. People will know Dan Gainey through Jostens and Arabian horses, if that's one of your things. And a lot of folklore. I didn't know Mr. Gainey, but certainly a huge part of that community and the state of Minnesota. And he served on this board for many years. And what was interesting is that when Mr. Gainey, when Regent Gainey passed away, his estate, his horse farm, if you know, it's just south of Owatonna, the Gainey Center, was given to St. Thomas. And people will ask the question, well, why are you giving this to St. Thomas when you pass instead of the university, because you were part of this university so long? It's because at that time, the state was responsible for providing support to the university, and his philanthropy went for the private schools. Well, we know the reality. Today, that isn't the case, and frankly, we could not do what we do if it wasn't for what you do. And I would take a moment, in addition, and I'm sure obviously this is part of what you do, but when I look at what these donors provide, what they give of their treasure, and they have families and obligations, and yet they dig deep to find ways to support the mission of the university and provide this. And I have especially a soft spot for those that are funding these scholarships, recognizing the changes in the dynamic for having access to a public education, which is not nearly as accessible financially as it was many years ago. But the folks that do that for people that they don't know, I know. For me, I was the beneficiary of that kind of philanthropy as I made my way through the institution. And so we are so blessed to have the three of you and with the Lindahls, the credibility that you bring based on your generosity to the university and what you've done to change lives. I think can't be overstated in your ability to reach out to others and have as an example as well as a partner in coming up with ways of impacting our state. So I want to just join my colleagues in saying thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Regent Rocha. Last word from the board from Regent Chu.
Well, thank you, Chair McMillan. Thank you, John, Nancy, Kathy, President Kaler, Karen Kaler, all the volunteers. I think this is fabulous. I think you're ahead of schedule, and as Nancy just said, the pipeline is healthy. I'd just like to challenge you to beat Michigan.
How about Wisconsin?
Wisconsin too. But I would love to see us set a record here in this campaign. You know, campaigns are often extended to bring in even more than they've been able to do. So I just want to thank you all again and wish you well in the next couple of years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Regent Hsu. I now want to give a last word to the organizational champion for all of this, our president.
I think I have 14 words. 15. Thank you for your kind words, for your partnership and your leadership. It's great to be on your team.
Thank you.
Excellent wrap up. Thank you, President Kaler. That brings us now to the Presidential Search Advisory Committee membership and the charge for that committee. And before I seek a motion to ratify the membership and the charge, I'd like to make some fairly significant but still introductory remarks. And let me begin here. Since President Kaler announced he would step down at the end of this coming academic year, we've been working carefully to design a credible and inclusive search process. Vice Chair Powell and I have been working together to thoughtfully assemble a Presidential Search Advisory Committee and to craft its charge. We sought to engage the entire university community by seeking nominations for the committee. We were beyond impressed by the nearly 400 individuals who were nominated for this important role. We asked, the university community responded eagerly, and we listened. Thank you to each person who took time to nominate or was nominated. Regent Powell and I wanted a committee that reflects the breadth, the diversity of the university community, including students, faculty, staff, alumni, and community members. There's no perfect way to assemble a committee like this, and I'm sure each person around this table would have or might have done it somewhat differently. But we have a group that we're very proud to bring before you today. They're stellar, they're enthusiastic, and they're ready to serve this university. After the membership list became public, I received and Regent Powell received feedback that fell into several categories. First, and very significantly, we had a lot of very strong support for both the committee and the charge. We also had critiques, and I want to talk about those briefly here. One critique was we selected too few students. Another was that we selected an insufficient number of staff. And a third was that we didn't have quite enough executive governance and complex organizational leadership governance expertise. I also heard from a lot of you sitting around the table with us today. I want to respond to that feedback because we did listen. First of all, I'm very pleased to let you all know that Mark Sheffert has agreed to join the committee as a third member, addressing that need for additional executive governance and complex organizational leadership expertise from outside the university. He brings very significant executive management governance experience, and you'll see his information in the revised materials that will be handed out. Second, we carefully considered staff nominations from across the university. We have representation from the P&A group, from civil service, and from bargaining unit employees. And while some may wish for more or different representation, we're confident these individuals listed in the docket will do an excellent job representing that important category of university constituents. And I'll have a word to say in a moment about listening sessions. 6 of those listening sessions are focused on staff input. Finally, the student representatives to the board, along with system campus student government leaders, have expressed concern that the committee does not include a student from outside the Twin Cities. I'm an outside the Twin Cities person. I understand that concern, but I want to assure everybody, especially those students, that we will be hearing from students throughout the system in the course of this process. As we assembled the committee, we considered how to best represent students across the system. So we appointed the chair of the university-wide Student Senate, And although that student is from the Twin Cities campus, her role is to represent the entire system at the Senate and on this committee. We need to act more like a system, and this seat was intentionally filled with a student who has system-wide responsibility. She will be joined by a graduate student from CSE. We're confident that they together will be very effective in bringing broad student perspectives to this process. And I'd also like to make very clear that input into the search process is not limited to representation on the committee. The committee looks forward to hearing from students at each of the 9 listening sessions being held solely for students across the system. And Regent Abdul Omari, committee chair, will participate in both the Student Senate Retreat and the Minnesota Student Association Forum. We look forward to hearing a breadth of student perspective and voices across these opportunities. There are also, as I mentioned earlier, alluded to, 6 listening sessions devoted to staff input across the system. So Regent Powell and I are excited about all 23 faculty, student, alumni, staff, regents, and community members who have agreed to serve the university through their time and effort on this committee. They are accomplished individuals who have deep and varied connections to the university and to the state of Minnesota. I encourage you to read their biographies in the docket materials if you haven't done so already. A very impressive group indeed. I also want to take this opportunity to express my gratitude and the board's gratitude for the time and effort that the community members will commit to serve in this capacity. It's a big time commitment by busy people, and their work is deeply consequential. Special thank you is in order at this point for our chair, Regent Abdul Omari, who is making the biggest commitment of all. If you looked at his calendar, it's a scary look. So now let me turn to the charge. The committee's job is to broadly engage the university community, recruit presidential candidates, and narrow the field to 3 or 4 lead candidates for the board to consider. They'll do this, first and foremost, by using the board's clearly articulated core leadership criteria. The committee will also carefully consider candidate fit at the university, in part through the input they receive at listening sessions across the 5 campuses of this institution. Let me add a bit more about the listening sessions because I want to emphasize how crucial university community input is to the committee's work. Starting Monday, members of the search committee will travel across the system, kicking off in Crookston, then on to Morris, then to St. Paul, followed by the West Bank, then up to Duluth, back to the Twin Cities and the East Bank, bringing the sessions to a close in Rochester. Each campus stop will include individual sessions with faculty, students, staff, and alumni and community members, allowing each conversation to be focused and to ensure that there are as many voices be heard as is possible within the time we've made available. I want to encourage you to attend the session closest to you. The full schedule is posted at the board's presidential search website. And with that, let me say again that both the committee membership and the charge, we've been thoughtful and thorough. This is an important moment for the university, and I ask for your support, members of the board, to move this search forward. But before we get to Regent questions and comments, I've invited Professor Joe Constant to make a few remarks. Professor Constant is, of course, a key partner with the board in shared governance as the chair of the Faculty Consultative Committee and the Senate Consultative Committee. And Professor Constant has graciously agreed in the middle of his busy schedule to share some thoughts with us. And as he tees up, I just want to say on a very personal note, Professor Constant, I have come to deeply appreciate many things about you. You're thoughtful, you're articulate, you're frank, and you bring a long-term view to every conversation we have. So I have come to appreciate and expect that, and I know I'll hear that today. So go ahead.
Thank you, Chair McMillan, members of the board. I'm going to comment on the 3 things really before you today: the competencies, the search process, the search committee. From the perspective here primarily of faculty, I've done a lot of outreach and in-reach and listening sessions early in this process, not meant to replace the later process, but to inform it. On the competencies, I think there's one key message, that this is a compound and complex institution, that no candidate, not even one who can walk on Minnesota's frozen water, can have the expertise and time to run a university like this. Rather, we need someone who can lead recruiting and developing top people, marshaling the creativity, expertise, and energy of the thousands of leaders who are here at the university. And for this reason, we focus less on specific skills that are needed for the university to run and more on the things that are the unique role of the presidency, including effective public advocacy for the university internally with elected leaders and also with the public of the state and beyond. We need an effective spokesperson and advocate for the university, a demonstrated commitment to educating students, to research, to the land-grant mission, and to the values we hold dear, vitally including academic freedom and the full range of disciplines from arts and the humanities to social and natural sciences to agriculture, education, the professions, medicine. I could go on a long time, but I said I would be brief. A track record that earns the respect of faculty and the university community. This is somebody who has to have demonstrated excellence in whatever he or she has done in his or her career and through exemplary ethical behavior and leadership. The ability to effectively manage crises without stopping progress on key priorities and never losing sight of the overall health of the institution. Somebody who hones in on the problem of today isn't taking care of the university of tomorrow, and we need somebody with that broad vision. The good sense and humility to lead change by hiring and developing excellent people and empowering others to contribute to developing and implementing a compelling vision for the institution. And finally, a real commitment to this university, not simply the ambition to become a university president somewhere and then perhaps somewhere else, but some connection that is a reason we can believe that someone like our current president wants to be the leader of the University of Minnesota and wants this university to be great. As far as the search process, the faculty feel it is essential to cast a wide net and to identify a diverse pool, and we appreciate that you're using a search firm that's explicitly articulated that commitment. We have faith in a committee-driven process, and we think that the people who can emerge from a diverse and thoughtful committee are the right ones to be the candidates for president of the university. And finally, about the committee nominees themselves, like everyone else, I can quibble about the composition. I can give you a list of how the committee would be better with just these additional 17 faculty members added to it. But I can say that everyone I've spoken with is very happy with the qualifications of the individuals who are serving. This is not a committee of people that we look at and say, whoa, you've got to think about whether that person deserves to be in the room. You know, whether those people are honorable regents or members of the public or members of the faculty, the student body, and the staff, alumni. These are good people, and as a faculty, we're supportive of the committee, and we're committed to working with the board to make this search a success. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Constant. Now, I will entertain a motion and a second to ratify the Presidential Search Advisory Committee membership in charge as outlined in the revised document materials.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded, and I'd like to start with asking my committed and dedicated and talented Vice Chair Regent Powell to provide his perspective. You've heard a lot from me. It's time to hear from Regent Powell.
Well, thanks for that introduction to our good-looking chair. There's something different about you. Look, I want to echo the comments, your comments, Chair McMillan, and very enthusiastically support the committee membership and the charge. Let me just make a few very brief comments. It was and has been very heartening to see as many nominations as we did see for this committee. But I will tell you, it also made the task of assembling the committee very, very difficult. And there were many, many very good choices. But suffice it to say that I strongly believe that the list before you represents the quality and the breadth and the diversity of our great university. I also want to thank all of you for your engagement and input, all throughout this exercise. Your advice and your feedback and your comments, both on the committee and on the charge, very, very clearly improved the final product, and grateful for that. I've been involved in a few of these searches over my career, and I feel very strongly that we have a very good committee, a very good charge, and a very open and inclusive process. So with that, Chair McMillan, those are my comments, and I'll yield to the next speaker.
Thank you, Vice Chair Powell. Regent Rocha has expressed an interest, and I welcome commentary from anybody else. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as a bit of an aside, a reflection of I think the positive social environment, the fact that your new appearance has made such a central role and has played such a central role in these board meetings. From my standpoint of a kid growing up when I did, watching the Christmas shows with that hint of red, I can't help but see the young Kris Kringle when I when I see the chair. But
I think I've aged myself. So thank you.
That's a good thing. I appreciate the tremendous amount of work. I think that there's an improvement with the addition, and just as Professor Constant stated, we all will have a perspective on what would be the ideal structure. One of my concerns in the feedback that we were receiving, and particularly the response from students, and I thought it was wonderful that there were as many students nominated and interested in serving. Is I just want to, this is not really a symbolic committee from a representational standpoint, but it's a working committee, and that I think that it's always a challenge to find that kind of range of background and perspective to get to that point. And so, I want to ensure that certainly for students and anybody else that's concerned about the input in this process, that there will be those opportunities. And I know that's been stated already, but from my perspective, I really want this committee to get down to the nitty-gritty and do this analysis for the types of skills that Professor Constant just walked through, and which I wholeheartedly support. I note that from my perspective, where the buck actually stops, this board ultimately has to make the determination of who will replace our president, and so much of with this committee, the power in the committee is not so much the power to forward names, but the power to exclude. And so I want to just ensure that we are going to be getting that opportunity to have a range of candidates to select. To be able to identify those qualities that this board ultimately is comfortable with as we seek to meet the exceptional needs of the university through its chief executive. I have other thoughts on that process. I may consult with the board office and the chair about how to communicate those perspectives rather than doing it here right now. But I do appreciate the tremendous amount of work, and I will be supporting the charge and the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Rocha. Regent Hsu.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair McMillan. This is just about the committee, right? We're going to have another discussion.
We've got a motion in front of us for both the committee and the charge.
Well, I'll just react. I'm supportive of the committee. I don't know most of the people on this committee, but I trust they will do a good job in following the charge and applying the criteria to produce finalists or semi-finalists or lead candidates, as it's written in here, for the position. I do think the addition of Mark Sheffert is a good addition, so I support that. Regarding the charge, I think this is a really good charge and list of leadership criteria that was produced through kind of a committee, with a lot of input, and I support it. I didn't get everything I wanted in it, and I hope that everyone else is supportive of it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, members of the board. Any further input or commentary? Otherwise, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Very good. We have a charge and a committee, and Regents Swigum and Lucas and Omari, you are launched here and ready to go. And again, I mentioned this in my remarks, but Regent Omari, thank you for the extraordinary time commitment you're going to make, as well as Steve and Peggy. It's a big big one. We're grateful as a board, and we look forward to this process advancing. And we will reconvene to talk about this when you've concluded your work. Thank you. All right, that takes us on to the committees and yesterday's and this morning's outcomes. Guess we didn't have any action items this morning, but we had some yesterday. I'd move first to Mission Fulfillment Committee Chair Regional Mari for his report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Mission Fulfillment Committee had one action item this month, the consent report. I'd like to call special attention to one of the important items that was included, the posthumanist promotion of Dr. Marilyn Susie Nanny to full professor. Dr. Nanny was in the process of applying for the promotion when she died unexpectedly in June. She was an accomplished researcher who dedicated her career to improving the health and nutrition of underserved populations, particularly children. Dr. Nanny's research focused on childhood and adult obesity, health disparities, and school nutrition policies and practices. The committee voted to recommend approval of the consent report, which also includes academic program additions, changes, and discontinuations, and conferral of tenure for outside hires. I move approval of the consent report.
Is there a second?
Second.
Very good. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my report.
Very good. It takes us to audit and compliance. Chair Regent Cohen.
Thanks, Chair McMillan. We had no action items this month. In addition to reviewing the committee work plan, we had two discussion items. First, two consultants from Deloitte joined us for a conversation about national audit trends in higher education, focusing on two interesting topics: cyber threats and resource planning and management. Then in our second discussion item, Chief Auditor Klatt presented a review of trends in internal audit findings from the last 3 years. The discussion was complementary to the regular updates and audit reports we receive. She concluded the presentation with a list of top opportunities for improvement. It was interesting to see the trends, and we ran out of time, but we're going to revisit the conversation at a future meeting. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Regent Cohen, and I'd commend to any of the regents on the Lit Review Committee that weren't in that to take a look at both the materials from our external auditor about trends across the country. It's excellent material, as well as, of course, our eminently capable Chief Auditor and her report. So, litigation review, Regent Beeson.
Mr. Chair, the Litigation Review Committee met yesterday in accordance with Minnesota Open Meeting Law, closed the session, and discussed the approved agenda matters.
Very good. Thank you. Regent Anderson, you had a few things going on in finance and operations yesterday. It's time for your report.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. The Finance and Operations Committee acted on 5 items yesterday. The committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the relocation of the Becker Sandplain Research Farm and a new 30-year lease. I move approval of this real estate transaction.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve that real estate transaction. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That carries.
The committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of an amendment to the fiscal year 2019 annual capital improvement budget for the mass spectrometer room expansion in the Cancer and Cardiovascular Research Building, Twin Cities campus. I move approval of the capital budget amendment.
Second. Moved and seconded. Is there discussion on that item? All in favor? Aye. Aye. That opposed? Hearing none, that carries.
The committee separated 2 items from the revised consent report. I will move the rest of the consent report first, and then the additional items individually. For the consent report, the committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the consent report, which includes the Central Reserve's contingency allocations, the purchase of goods and services of $1 million and over, and 2 schematic designs. I move approval of the consent report.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the consent report from Finance and Operations. Any discussion on that? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries as well.
The committee voted to recommend approval of the creation of a new entity regarding the acquisition of the University Village property. I move approval of the University Village acquisition entity.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. I don't feel that we finished our discussion yesterday. We were cut off without the ability of some of us to react to statements late in the discussion. But I want to say that the discussion yesterday should really have been more about how we're going to move forward with this transaction and whether or not we should be seeking a partner or partners. There was a lot of discussion after the meeting where other information was presented, and I'm just looking to see what the next steps are in this process.
President Kaler.
Thank you, Chair McMillan. I think probably the most qualified person to address that would be Senior Vice President Burnett and or General Counsel Peterson. So, Brian, if you do not mind addressing that question for Regent Hsu.
Senior Vice President Burnett, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, Regent Hsu, as we discussed yesterday, it's still developing, and our potential partner notified us today that they will make a final decision next week, and that they remain interested in partnering with us in this acquisition. And they have questions similar to your questions that we're still answering. But as of this morning, our partner remains active and engaged and wants to be a part of this transaction. At least that's the indication I have from this morning.
And to add my own thought here, I expect we will have multiple opportunities and real-time updates as they become available, hopefully with as much lead time as possible to give Regents the opportunity for thoughtful consideration.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, we will work to give you all the details as they become finalized, given that the clock is ticking and there's a deadline for closure if we're going to make this transaction happen, which we continue to believe is very strategic for the university.
Very good. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question, but in response to Senior Vice President Burnett's comments, there are three things that you said that give me pause. One is you said our partner. I would suggest that you were talking about a potential partner. Secondly, you said we're going to finalize the plan, but we haven't had an opportunity to evaluate it from our perspective. And then finally, you said that we believe that this would be a strategic approach. I can't tell you it's a strategic approach because I just don't have enough information about what we're discussing, and that it becomes a function of, really identifying what our institution's long-term interests might be and whether it makes sense to go with Plan A, Plan B, or no plan at all. And so I just want to make that clear. The question that I had in this instance of Regent Anderson, could you please restate what the motion is to approve? What did you describe the LLC as?
Chairman
Regent Anderson.
The committee voted to recommend approval of the creation of a new entity regarding the acquisition of the University Village property.
Okay.
Regent Rocha.
Mr. Chair, I just want to again confirm that, as people were saying in the discussion yesterday, the word regarding is, this is not an acquisition vehicle. This is a vehicle for the potential of an acquisition. And I want to make the record in our sort of full minutes model, perhaps, to make it very clear what we're doing here. And then I would just restate, since I'm on the floor here, that my concern is the potentiality, because it's not necessary to advance the ball. I think it's the wrong standard. I think the fact that we might need one, even though we could create one at the time that we are actually entering into the vote, I don't think this is the right standard. And my concern is that when you have that standard at that level, you're putting your finger on the scale in the decision-making process. And that's what I'd like to avoid. I'd like for the board to be able to walk in and very objectively evaluate the proposal in front of us. And I look forward to the proposal. The problem is I haven't been given enough information and enough of analysis to really take us there. And so by creating this, I want to just ensure that we're not, again, tilting the evaluation in a way that we wouldn't if we were coming at it without that data. And so I will, again, vote against it. I understand that it will pass, and then hopefully we will be able to have a conversation as we described yesterday. Thank you.
Very good. I don't see any other hands up for interest and comment on that, so we'll call a vote on the Finance and Operations Committee recommendation to adopt the motion as reread by Regent Anderson. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Very good. Regent Anderson, more business.
The committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the employment agreement and the appointment of Dr. Michael Goh as Vice President for Equity and Diversity. I move approval of the employment agreement.
Second.
Very good. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Regent Swiggum.
If I could just for a second, Mr. Chairman. I think our discussion yesterday, the way I heard it initially talked about was the appropriateness of President Kaler appointing this person at this time in the last year of his service. I think it's very appropriate, and that was the discussion of yesterday, at least I remember to some degree. And President Kaler, I hope you're very bold in this last year of your service to the university, your last 10 months, doing things that maybe you wouldn't even have done had you not been ending your service as president. But I hope you're very bold. I think it's very appropriate. Then to the question of the individual, greatly qualified, good person, the salary. Folks, I need to tell you, it bothers me a little bit to be looking at salaries. And I know I'm not making a lot of friends amongst my friends out in the audience, but we need to be concerned about the salaries we pay in higher education. Now, I've heard over the past couple of years, I've been talking about this, about excellence and competitiveness. And I listen, and I try to listen very closely and try to be respectful, but also our competitiveness, obviously our competitiveness is not local governments or the state of Minnesota. I did some minimal checking. I just do minimal background work, and at the state of Minnesota, a comparable position, I don't know if it'd be the Commissioner of Human Rights. I would guess that because we do not have an equity and diversity officer. Commissioner of Human Rights makes $144,000. $100,000 less. So I tried to dig a little bit deeper, and in management and budget, we actually now have a Chief Inclusion Officer. How we came up with that name, I don't know, but it's a Chief Inclusion Officer. We pay that person $124,000. Half of the salary here. Now, I don't want to specifically look only at this salary, but folks, very, very honestly, if we want to talk just competitiveness, or if you want to talk excellence to get excellent people, which I certainly want at the university, that in turn tells you that the people we have at the state or at the Hennepin County or at Minneapolis are not excellent. I think they're excellent too. I really do. So I don't know about this whipsaw effect, but I'm concerned about the size of the salary, which ultimately, colleagues, has to go either on tuition of students or tax burden upon Minnesota taxpayers. Ultimately, it goes there. So because of the size of the salary, I'm not sure we're ever going to be able to control it. I don't think we will. So I'm going to use this format right now to encourage Mr. Burnett as we look at the charge that was given to you through an amendment maybe 3 or 4 months ago, when we look at head count at the University of Minnesota, I think that's the only way we're ever going to address costs is head count, because we're not going to probably do it on salaries, even though today I will be voting no. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Regent Swiggum. Not seeing other input here, I'm going to call for a vote on the motion as forwarded by Committee Chair Anderson. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Further business, Regent Anderson.
No, sir. Chair McMillan, that concludes my report.
Very good. And that takes us to this morning's committee meeting, and Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The committee met this morning. It was a robust discussion of several information items, and that concludes my report.
Very good. Thank you. That brings us to old business. Is there any old business to come before the board? Seeing, hearing none, move to new business. Any items of new business for us today? That takes us to adjournment at 2 minutes to 12, Regent Swigum.
So move.
Second. All in favor? Aye. We stand adjourned.
We'll add it to yourself.
Once you get past